here at CPAC with the force of nature that is Barclay McGain, a young legend amongst conservative circles. Barclay, thanks for doing this with me here today. And what gets you up in the morning, mate?
No worries. Oh, it's awesome to be at CPAC here with you, Matt. One thing that gets me up, I suppose, is the belief that whenever you're chatting to someone about conservative values and conservative beliefs, often it's for the first time. The amount of times that I've had a conversation with someone and it's their first impression of an alternative idea or of an alternative point of view, you really do get the cogs in their mind kind of turning over, and they say, I never thought about it that way. Because in our education systems, even in our workplaces, you never get that kind of both sides of the spectrum. Even with the number one issue on everyone's mind right now, the voice referendum, there's been huge, divergent between what is allowed for the no case and what is allowed for the yes case in terms of tax deductible status, in terms of the funding that is given to each campaign and the amount of media time. I mean, all the elites, all of the organisations are on the side of the yes campaign, but we're seeing the majority of people are supporting the no side. So I think a lot of the time it's really refreshing to have a conversation with someone and actually be that one who tells them about it for the first time. That's something that really gets me out of bed in the morning, because you feel like, hey, you're telling someone something new. I suppose on a more personal note, one thing that really gets me going is that people have fought hard and lost fights in the past for conservative causes. And, my good friend Wilson Gavin, he was an activist like me, a conservative activist, and he stood up for something which I would like to think is quite mainstream, in the sense that drag queens should not be reading to 3 and 4-year-olds, and even if they are, it should definitely not be publicly funded by ratepayers. And he took the noble cause of standing up against that, that crusade amongst kids, and for that crime he was slandered all over the media, all online, and tragically the next day he took his own life. And for someone to have passed away under those kind of circumstances at just 21, and I was only 19 myself when that happened, it's just absolutely startling that could happen, and that someone's life could be cut short in that way. And knowing the loss that we've had with Wilson, it really emboldens me to go on further. So
yeah. Well, I remember that time. Yeah. And I always thought that if it was somebody who wasn't a conservative activist, there would have been a much bigger outpouring of grief publicly and a media outcry. And it seemed to me as though that sort of happened in the darkness. Yeah. And if anything, there was a continued slandering even after the young man had taken his life. So it's an absolute tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt if it was to be someone from the left, there would be multiple charities, multiple people receiving OAMs on the back of starting those charities. But of course, when it's someone on the conservative aisle, everyone just seems to go quiet, and they don't really talk about it much, almost to pretend as though he's pushed under the carpet. And even the most sinister people were saying that because Wilson, he identified as being same-sex attracted, they were saying that, he was a clearly tormented individual because of his Catholic faith and his homosexuality. But I thought that was very sinister of people to assume why he did that, and to think that the fact that he was being slandered publicly all over Australia had nothing to do with what he went and did the next day was completely disingenuous. So, these are the people we're up against. They're trying to win a narrative battle. For them, it's always a narrative battle. You see with The Voice, you read the yes and no pamphlets. One is entirely about facts and the High Court and constitutionality. The other is all about feeling. It's these one-word sentences, these emotive statements. And that's what we're up against, a narrative battle. And
it's rationality versus emotionality.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to think that they're taking the Australian people for mugs. I mean, they're literally going to them with these feelings, and they're basically saying that, you won't understand this, so we're going to dumb it down for you, and just hope that you vote with us anyway. And that's the tragedy of what we're up against.
Yeah, look, it is really sad. So, Barclay, you're, I suppose, another expelled. That's right. So former Liberal like me and others.
Is the word we use.
Yeah, dissident. Here we are with dissidents. Yeah. But do you still carry a passion for the Liberal Party?
Definitely. I think I look at those "we believe" statements that Robert Menzies originally made when he founded the party, and they really speak to me. I'm someone who I would say I'm a free marketeer. I'm definitely for small government and for maintaining the family as the fundamental unit for society, and that involves not deferring everyone to the welfare state, but recognising that if we have a strong, robust family cohesion, that we're able to provide for people who can't provide for themselves, and that's something that's completely gone by the wayside. I mean, the last 30 years, the growth of government, even government programs which most people view favourably, like the NDIS, have just just grown out of control, and it's because we've tried to destabilise that family unit, I think.
Yeah, that's I think an absolute fundamental. You know, the family unit, and then I think you start adding things like freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion.
Yep.
So what is the solution in your mind? Where do you think we need to go, and what do we need to do to sort of turn the tide and get things back to where they need to be?
Yeah, I think people honestly need to start asking themselves the question of, okay, I want to be politically involved. Sure, everyone gets their vote at the ballot box, and that will always be people's sacred right. In Australia's history, we've always been a pioneer of the secret ballot. But the question is, everyone can do that. In fact, everyone's forced to do that in Australia. But aside from that, what can you do, right? And, obviously a lot of people have just become political due to this whole COVID craziness, and they thought that their version of being involved politically was to go out and protest one day. And we saw, 30,000 people protesting on the Sydney streets and up in Brisbane. But then they all go home and the politicians say, phew, glad that's over, right? And there has to be more than that. And to my mind, people need to get involved in terms of party membership status. And, I would never knock people for being involved in any political party. I think sometimes there's a lot of utility in minor parties, and they definitely play a role to keep the major parties in check and balance. But fundamentally, I think I look at a party like One Nation or the Libertarian Party / Liberal Democrats, and I think to myself, how many policies have they constructed? How many policies have they crafted and implemented to make people's lives better? And the answer is nothing, because they've never been in government. Sure, they've served on the crossbench, and I think sometimes when you have a crossbench of freedom-friendly minor parties, it can be quite healthy. But fundamentally, they're not in the business of making policy. They're in the business of just a protest.
Yeah, well, you can almost say anything when there's no threat of you ever having to implement it, right?
Definitely,
So
yeah.
you can be a lot more cheeky, but is it going to be as effective? And that's a really good question. So would you recommend people join the Liberal Party then?
I think fundamentally that's where you're best placed. A lot of people will find people that represent the Liberal Party or purport to represent the Liberal Party and see them as, someone who we really cannot agree with, or someone who does not represent those we believe statements. But the thing to realise is, hang on, how did they get to that position in the first place? And it was because it was a democratic ballot of voters. And someone that I look up to in Queensland, my home state, is Senator Gerard Rennick. And he's someone who routinely talks about those values of fundamentally believing in small government, a healthy distrust for government as well. He doesn't shy away from. And he's someone who in 2019, grassroots members, said, hey, we all believe in you, Senator Gerard Rennick, and you're the person to represent us. And thank goodness he was a senator speaking during the COVID mania era.
Yeah.
But as a result of that era, people went up and left the Liberal Party because they saw Scott Morrison not standing up against introducing vaccination mandates, the establishment of National Cabinet, which was just treacherous.
Ridiculous.
And they said, okay, well, I'm not going to renew my membership in the Liberal Party. And then Gerard's term expires, and it expires, very soon. And all of a sudden, all the people who put him in that place in 2019, they're up and about in minor parties, or they're protesting on the street, thinking that that's changing something. So there needs to be a bit of a recalibration here. It's not a cognitive dissonance. A lot of people say, well, I don't know how I can cognitively be in the Liberal Party or in a major party when they're doing all of this stuff. Your vote at the ballot box is still always your vote. Your party membership is a complete different thing. And sometimes I think you've got to view a major party not so much as something where you believe in or you don't believe in, but more as like a vehicle.
Yeah.
You could drive that vehicle fast or slow. You can drive it to the right location or the wrong location, but you can't drive it if you're not in the wheel, the wheel. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that people who have resigned their membership in disgust or won't join the party because they're not happy with where it is currently, are doing that to send some kind of message to people that would prefer they don't join the party in the first place anyway? So it's almost self-defeating. I know I would cheerfully renew my membership if I could, even though things aren't in the best of positions, because I believe from the inside you can fight and push and drive and make the change, as I think some of us have. Would you agree with that?
Well, 100%. And I think, if you think, oh, well, they're not going to get my $110 or $45, whatever it is for a young LNP person, you're not really getting to their hip pocket. I mean, most of these political parties will find external sources of revenue. Donations are a big fundraiser, and people denying them their $45, it really is not going to hit them where it hurts. And it's also a case that, hey, if they have less people in the party, then it's far more easier to win democratic ballots and things like that. So, if you have a strong, robust membership that's growing, And I think a lot of the things that we don't talk about is the trajectory. And the average age of the average LNP member in Queensland is over 70. And if we don't have young people taking up that fight to be more involved, then it really does spell a bad future for the Liberal Party, at least in Queensland, if we can't have that kind of generational renewal that we've had for ages.
I think that's right, Barclay, and I think you're an inspiration to
Thank you, I appreciate that.
to a generation.
Yeah.
You're certainly an inspiration to a lot of us. As I said, I think you're a force of nature. I think you do really good work, and hopefully you can get Jared returned when he gets his proper,
Let's hope.
proper selection. Don't cheat this time. Can't have any more cheating. It's no good. Because one of the problems that I think we have, if I could just quickly segue before we go back to the conference.
Of course, yeah.
I think the vast majority of people in the Liberal Party are centre-right Menzies Liberals.
Sure.
I've never really met a green left Liberal voter in the wild, out there in the public. They just don't seem to exist to me. But they seem to exist inside. There's a small percentage of people inside the Liberal Party that talk about, the things that matter to them. Don't seem to matter to anybody else. I won't mention Matt Keane's name, but they certainly do seem to believe that they speak for all of us with their Kennedy posters up and all those other sorts of things. When in reality, I think they don't speak for anybody, and I think that's starting to become more and more obvious as we're losing more and more seats out of the party fold. And I believe the Teal threat is more a threat. If I could say, because the Liberal Party isn't speaking to its base of voters anymore, and the voters are punishing the Liberal Party, but they're not punishing by voting Green or Labor. There's the tip. They're voting Teal or Independent, and they're going for that softer option. But I think they'd return. So do you think that we can, as a conservative movement within the party, do you think we can actually turn the tide and actually get good Menzies-style Liberals, Libertarians, Conservatives, not progressive wokes, sort of, leftists, into seats and really turn the tide through membership?
I think we can. Fundamental to all of that, or a precursor to all of that happening, is allowing democratic ballots to be held within the party. And I think what you pointed out there, where you've got, the membership, the grassroots membership, you go to a membership meeting and you say, okay, these are my people. You see the rank and file. You see these are people who believe in that we believe statement, traditional values. But then you see some of the politicians not implementing that. And to me, the elephant in the room is the power of lobby groups nowadays. There is huge power to influence people holding positions of power in office, and they are taking precedent over the democratic grassroots. So that's why a precursor to everything that we've just mentioned is the ability for members to have a say in who their local representative is. And I think you'd end up with better representatives if you were to go down that path. And it's a real shame what happened. And I know your story, Matt, regarding the High Court challenge. And as I said on Friday night at our pre-CPAC volunteers meeting, you may not have won the legal battle, but you certainly won the morale battle. And there's a lot of people that have come up to me and, often Matt Kevin's always he who shall not be named, but a lot of people saying that in private they all support you and they all support your endeavour, and fundamentally what you're trying to do is not even necessarily a left or a right wing thing. It's just more of a principled stance. It's not an avenue for either side. It's just, hey, let's level the playing field and let's play ball.
I think that's absolutely right, and you can see why you're doing the sort of work that you're doing, Barclay, and you're really turning the place upside down. And I wish you all the very best of luck. And if there's ever anything I can do to help you, it's done.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Matt. Awesome. I'll see you around.
Thanks, brother.